With the ups and downs of league football finally settled, the great match at Wembley becomes the sole talking point of the fans. And what a final it promises to be.
Radio Times, April the 15th, 1927. Broadcasting the match of the year. This afternoon, listeners all over the country will be able to hear in their own homes the story told from the ground during the actual progress of the game of the match that packs the biggest arena in the country every year. An occasion that is the red-letter day in the calendar of everyone who follows the National Winter Game. More than 100,000 people failed to get tickets.
Thanks for trying, Sydney.
Millions more have been unable to make the trip. But everyone with a wireless set, whether he lives at Land's End or John O'Groats or anywhere within range of a BBC station, will be able to share in all the thrills of one of those days when football history is made.
You know, today we rather take the commentator and his art for granted. But back in 1927, football commentary hadn't been invented. Imagine what it must have been like trying to work out how to do it. And it was a man called Lance Sieve-King, who went on to produce great radio dramas, who came up with a scheme for training and selecting budding commentators.
I took likely people round to watch football games played by amateurs and small boys and asked them to describe to me into a microphone what they saw. Many were entirely flummoxed. But one chap looked quietly on for a few moments and then plunged headlong into a cataract of words which never stopped for an instant. He was Captain H.B.T. Wakelam. It was something like this. It was thrilling. I don't know who they are, but there's one little boy with the red hair. Oh, yes, he's going to pass. He's going to pass for a little boy with the red jersey. Oh, fine shot. Now, go on down the line with the little boy with the red hair. They're going to... Go on. It's magnificent. Shoot, shoot. It's a goal. So I engaged him.
But first things first. Before the commentator could commentate, he needed somewhere to sit. And what the BBC design boffins came up with was a sort of portable box which looked like a garden shed. Officially it was known as the cabin, and unofficially as the rabbit hutch, and it was literally transported from ground to ground.
The cabin from which the broadcast was made was set up on a temporary platform supported by scaffold poles and looked a fragile affair until one cast an eye over the expert trussing and roping.
Into this soundproof box went three men, obviously the commentator, but also an actor and a blind man. This may sound like the start of a bad joke, but then it was in fact a rather ingenious idea, once they could manage to squeeze themselves in.
Get about stuck.
Get the door shut. Get the door shut if you would. Can you shut? There you go. We're going to have to take the coats off, I think. Okay, let us out again. Everyone out again. Get out again.
Somehow, in the rather confined space, the blind man's task was to let the commentator know if he, the blind man, was unable to follow the game. The third person in the box was actor Charles Lapworth.
Again, it was Lance Sieve-King who'd introduced a thespian into the proceedings to undertake a role originally played by himself.
And then it occurred to me that people mightn't be able to follow Wakelam's description in their mind's eye at first. So I asked Radio Times to print a squared plan of the football field to which listeners could refer during the game. And a thing that looked like half a chessboard appeared with numbers in the squares. And when, for the first time, fans all over the country heard Wakelam's voice whizzing along, they also heard my voice in the background saying, square 4, square 2, square 1, square 7. And they shook with laughter at the picture I created of players leaping from one end of the field to the other and back like so many fleas.
This really works well, Mother.
And a crashing tackle comes in there from Busby. He gives it to Veen, who is the number 9 for Everton. He's striding forward.
In 4 now.
I think he's about to shoot.
In 2.
And he does. Oh, what a blunder. A blunder there by Veen.
This experiment proved to be a roaring success. There was a flood of letters to Radio Times from grateful listeners, both at home and abroad.
Dear sir, I've just switched off from the football match 1,500 miles away. and I should like to express the deep appreciation of a distant listener for a pleasure he little dreamt of experiencing before returning to the home country. The announcers admirably discharged a difficult task, and the frequent calling out of the number of the section in which play was in progress enabled one splendidly to follow the course of play. I have, thanks to this afternoon's innovation, once more that Saturday feeling which is inseparable from a visit to a first-class football match. Yours, A.F. Harris, Le Fallais, Parbouguet, Algeria.
And a very eager young man goes running over towards the touchline there to retrieve that ball which went out of play. And Mr. Wood, the referee, is looking at his watch. As indeed am I.
Yeah, and the referee blows his whistle for half-time.
Half-time, Mother.
At half-time, the engineers insisted on carrying out another microfilm test. So the announcer read aloud an article from Radio Times about the fashions prevailing in Paris, which tickled the nearby fans exceedingly.
Will you talk for a volume line-up?
I'm just going to read something out, and Charles will attempt to give the squares as usual. These are not dresses for the woman who must make one evening gown serve many occasions, nor for the woman whose evening gaieties take her mostly to restaurants or theatres. They're for the woman whose life is lived on a scale of social importance.
6.
The second group is the longer at the back, soft, floating, diaphanous type of dress.
8.
Not an absolutely new silhouette, but now presented in greater variety.
1.
These dresses are more adaptable than those of the first group. They dance in restaurants as well as at formal balls. They do not crush at the theatre, and they may be worn many times.
And back to square one.
How was that for you, London?
Well, that seems okay here. I'll see how Brookman Sparks like it. Right.
You what? These are not my new trousers.
And so we move forward to modern times. How much of the broadcasts of football matches changed since my days in the commentary box? One of the BBC's best-known young commentators today is Alan Green, he of the charming Irish brogue. And one of his first comments to me was about modern commentary positions. He said that in essence they haven't altered a great deal in the last 50 or 60 years.
I think in essence, you know, the commentary positions haven't altered a great deal over the last 50, 60 years. I mean, we're still in amongst the crowd. Sometimes, as at Bramall Lane or Old Trafford, we're high on a gantry that's slung beneath the main roof, just above the spectators. Here at Villa Park, we're in a press box, right at the back of the main stand, a terrific view. Other grounds, we're right in amongst the punters. At Loftus Road, I'm surrounded by season ticket holders, and if they don't like what I say and they can hear, either directly or through a transistor radio, they give me the odd nudge just to make sure I behave myself. But, you know, I think back to that commentary box. I often wish that we had one that we transported around the ground. At least we'd be warm, relatively warm, and relatively dry, and that's not always the case, I can tell you, in radio commentary.
Well, it wasn't that comfortable, Alan. At least we weren't so exposed. Anyway, shortly after Lance Seaverking had launched my commentary on an unsuspecting public, a new man took over. His name was Seymour de Lobinier, a fine chap, and his successor, Robert Hudson, remembers him and his notes for would-be sound broadcasting commentators.
It says here, notes for would-be sound broadcasting commentators. But Lobby went, we called him Lobby. He was 6 foot 7 inches tall, terrific man. Legal training, analytical mind. He went a lot further. He said, what you've got to do is establish your own position, the commentator, and relate the event you're describing consistently to your own position. Get the listener behind your skull and keep him there all the time. That was the main thing. Then weave the action, that is the bowler running up to bowl, the footballer running down the right wing, with the background, with the crowd, with the scoreboard. Not take them in separate bits, but weave them together in a continuous story. I interviewed Wilfred Rhodes, the great cricketer, in 1955. He was blind when he was old, and he summed it up, I thought, absolutely perfectly about radio commentaries. He said, paint a picture and keep it the right way up.
Keep it the right way up. Very good. Yes. But young Alan Green thinks the style of commentary has changed dramatically since the early days. Not for the better, in my opinion.
I think the style of commentary has changed dramatically since the early days, but the basics remain the same, the basics that we all must adhere to.
Where's the ball? Who's got it? What's the score and what's the time? I mean, that is an ingredient in everyone's commentary. But everything else, well, that's down to individual style and how you elaborate.
Yes, and some people elaborate a little more than others, oh boy.
And there'll be some keen eyes on the two right-backs today.
Now, what about this new business of television? Now, you would think it would be a jolly sight easier when you can see what's going on with your own eyes. But what is the view of Mr. John Motson, a TV chap, you know? He said he found television immensely more difficult than radio.
I found television immensely more difficult than radio. Because I'd done radio first, I got used to the wide brief of being able to describe practically everything that was in front of me, right down to which way the teams were kicking and where the ball was, which of course is very important in radio, the geography, to tell the listener where exactly the game is at. Whereas when I turned to television, I well remember the feeling of fear in the pit of my stomach when they kicked off in my first TV game, because I honestly thought, what on earth do I say now? Because everybody can see the pitch and the players and where the ball is and what they're doing. And of course the television commentator has to either add or amplify or interpret, or maybe best of all sometimes just keep quiet. So I would think that television, with its extra dimension of having to be aware of the picture that the viewer is seeing, does demand far more of you technically than radio.
People sometimes ask me which is more difficult. A very difficult question to answer that. It's very hard to do a very good television commentary. But it's quite easy to sort of get away with it, you know? But on radio, if you haven't a certain fluency and the ability to talk fluent sense, you won't even begin. So on the whole, I would say radio is the more difficult.
I love doing radio because of the simplicity of it. I mean, there you were with an open brief, the field in front of you, nobody could see anything, which of course at times is an advantage, because if you make a mistake you can rectify it, whereas in television you can't. Not then anyway. And I think that the clear brief in radio is to obviously paint the picture for the listener. In television they have their own picture, and quite often what you say is an irritation. So in many ways the silences and the pauses are as important in a television commentary as the times when you're speaking. Dixon.
Ruddock. Overhit. That was right. This is McGoldrick. Campbell out on the right-hand side.
Well, bluntly, I've looked into more interesting dishwater than this. It's been awful fair between Liverpool and Arsenal so far. I just hope that this second half, which has got underway, some 25 seconds old, is infinitely better than the first. I started as a television commentator. I didn't spend that long in television commentary, but I did enough to appreciate that the essence there is knowing when to shut up. Now, radio commentary is entirely different. We've got to paint the whole picture, not just what's going on the pitch, but what's happening in the stands, how the man 3 rows away from me is reacting to the game, whether it's pain or pleasure, what's happening outside the ground. Some of these elevated commentary positions we have, you know, we can see car lights twinkling in the distance, because remember, I'm there representing the man who can't be there.
I think I would certainly watch it on television, because there's nothing that beats the picture, really, is there? But I mean, radio is so mobile. You now have transistors, you have motor car radios, you can take your football match all over the country and all over the world. So, perforce, it is splendid, and if it's well done by the commentator, it can be very satisfying. But it's very difficult to beat television, to be quite honest, isn't it?
Television is marvellous, isn't it? Remember those World Cup goals from 1970? You've actually seen them.
When I went to Italy in 1990 for the World Cup, to a large degree we were divorced from what the feeling was back in England, and particularly about how England were progressing in the competition. And it was only brought home to me when I got back from Italy. And the Rolling Stones had a concert at Wembley the night England played West Germany in the semi-final. And Jagger was on stage in the middle of a number, and suddenly there's a roar all around Wembley Stadium. 70,000 people inside Wembley. There's a roar. And Jagger thinks, this is not connected to anything that we're doing. And he stops. The Stones stop mid-number. And Jagger inquires, what's going on out there? And he's told, Lineker has equalised. Now, what had happened was that all those people, or many of them, had transistor radios and an earpiece in here. And in the other ear, they're listening to the Stones. And here, they're listening to BBC Radio's commentary in the World Cup semi-final. And I'd commentated on the goal.
Stephen makes the run. Parker ignores him, plays it towards Lineker inside the penalty. Danger here! Lineker with a great shot and he scores! Gary Lineker has done it for England! 10 minutes left for play! And the leading scorer in Mexico grabs the equaliser just when England needed it. Confusion reigned in the German defence. It fell onto Lineker's left foot, and from 12 yards, he made no mistake. 2 goals against Cameroon, another against West Germany. That's 4 in total for Lineker in this World Cup. Well done, Gary.
And it's the only commentary clip that I will listen to without having pain. I hate listening to my own voice, but I listen to that because it brings back so many good memories and the impact that radio can have.
And the kids run out of school and nothing else with them. It's a damn nuisance out here every day. I don't know, but come on in here, you. I don't know what I'm going to do with them.